Hello everyone, this is R.S. Miller at the endtimenews.org and today is May 9th, 2014. This is a special report. Prospect for World War III on the rise as Ukraine descends into civil war. In a report by RT.com, Kiev's army is shooting at civilians using tanks and armored personnel carriers in an attack on the police headquarters in Mariupol.
Up to 8 people have reportedly been killed in the eastern Ukrainian city of Mariupol. The Ukrainian army has entered the city, which has been a focal point of anti-government resistance in the region, and started shooting. Several people were injured. Journalists working for RT's video agency WWIII among them. These are pictures from the scene allegedly showing the army opening fire on crowds out on the streets to celebrate Victory Day. You can see there were women among those shot at. RT's Irina Galushko is following developments in the region for us.
The Ukrainian army has entered the city in the middle of the celebrations of Victory Day that were held there by the residents. Here's more from the eyewitnesses. As the events unfolded, they bring us the story.
Right now I'm at home, but from my window I can see the smoke in the center of the city. We were planning to have a Victory Day parade. My friend's grandpa is there right now. They are shooting to kill at civilians. Yesterday they surrounded the executive committee building and started shooting at the unarmed activists. Nobody has any weapons there. My friend Kirill was taken. Later we saw a photo of him tied up in a car posted in the social network. We don't know what will happen to him next.
I saw tanks and armored vehicles in Mariupol's main street, and they were heading towards the city council building. A lot of people were gathered there. There were also some people approaching the local interior ministry building, and it looks like Ukraine's forces are shooting at the legs of those who are trying to come close to it. I heard about 4 people were shot.
Now, of course, there were people out on the streets of Mariupol when the events started to unfold. There were reports of women and children who were in the crowds. Some of them were trying to, some of the people in the crowds were trying to stop the APCs from moving on the streets of Mariupol. And then there were also reports that a lot of people have started running towards the regional police building. The building at this point seems to be a smoking ruin with fire breaking out inside, reportedly from the shots being fired by the tanks and APCs. Also, we do know that there are reports coming that there have been people inside. So it does look like that at this point. It's the army versus not just the pro-federalization activists, but also civilians, and exactly what kind of a possible death toll and what kind of injuries we could be talking about is not yet clear. However, just to give you the scope of the magnitude of the events. So, of course, we've heard that a journalist working for RT's video agency, WWIII, has been wounded in the stomach despite wearing a bulletproof vest. Now, the doctors are saying in the hospital where he is right now that his injury is non-life-threatening and he is expected to make a full recovery. His wife, who's also a journalist working in the field, is there with him. However, the events in the southeastern Ukrainian city of Mariupol at this point seem to be taking the turn for worse with every passing moment.
This video from Mariupol shows gunfire coming from armored vehicles. As you can see here, an unarmed man appears to have been shot on the street as Ukrainian military vehicles passed by. We asked international relations expert Mark Sliboda why he thinks the army is attacking civilians, and he believes the radicals who joined Kiev's operation are to blame for the violence there.
This is not the Ukrainian regular army. The regular army has, up to this point, resisted orders from Kiev to move in to the cities of south and eastern Ukraine and has maintained static positions around and on the border with Russia. The units that have moved into Mariupol and elsewhere appear all to be members of the newly formed National Guard, which is formed up of ultranationalists, the self-defense forces, basically the fanatics and loyalists of the Euromaidan movement and riots in Kiev.
The violence currently taking place in Mariupol and other cities in eastern Ukraine is far more intense than was the situation which led to the Russian invasion and annexation of Crimea. On multiple occasions, Moscow has warned the government in Kiev not to use military force against Russian-speaking people in Ukraine. This warning has obviously gone unheeded as the number of civilian casualties continues to climb, which in turn could well be the pretext for a full-scale Russian invasion of eastern Ukraine and possibly beyond. Although several media sources have recently reported that Russian President Vladimir Putin has pulled his troops away from the Ukraine border, NATO Secretary General Anders Fogh Rasmussen stated that NATO has not seen any evidence of a Russian pullback. Additionally, it's being reported that the Russian president has urged the separatists in eastern Ukraine to postpone the May 11th referendum vote for secession from Ukraine. His recommendation was refused by some of the leaders of several of the regions looking to break away from Ukraine. The Ukrainian Prime Minister Arseniy Yatsenyuk made the comment that Putin's statement urging a postponement of the referendum was nothing more than hot air. If the vote on secession from Ukraine goes ahead as scheduled, we could be looking at a replay of the Crimea situation, only this time it could easily lead to World War III. Regardless of how Russia views the Ukraine crisis, NATO and the West views the crisis with grave concern for the peace and stability of Europe and the world.
Our consultations are very timely, as Russia's illegal and illegitimate aggression against Ukraine is the greatest challenge to Europe's security in a generation. So we have rightly reinforced the defense of our allies, including Poland. Right now, ships and aircraft from across NATO are demonstrating our vigilance and resolve from the Baltic to the Black Sea, and we stand ready to take further steps with enhanced exercises, updated defense plans, and appropriate deployments. We have also reinforced our support to Ukraine, for example, by helping to strengthen its defense reforms and the protection of critical infrastructure. And we have sent an unmistakable message to Russia. Your behavior doesn't belong to the 21st century. And your rhetoric draws on outdated cliches of the Cold War. Russia has been escalating this crisis from the start. Russia should live up to its international commitments and obligations, stop supporting separatists, and pull back its troops from Ukraine's borders, so that a political solution can finally be found to this grave crisis just next door from Poland. Less than 6 months ago, we met here in Poland to observe NATO's exercise Steadfast Yes, an exercise which practiced the alliance's collective defense. Today, as we see the most serious crisis in a generation unfolding on NATO's borders, we can say clearly that that was the right exercise at the right time in the right place. Collective defense is NATO's central task. That is why, right now, aircraft and ships from across the alliance are reinforcing the security of our allies from the Baltic Sea to the Black Sea. Russia's aggression against Ukraine undermines the peace and stability we have built so carefully in Europe. Russia claims that our actions are provocative and accompanied by hostile rhetoric. This is not true, and frankly, it is absurd. Our response is about solidarity among allies and collective defense. And it is part of the broad international efforts to de-escalate this crisis and find a political solution through dialogue and through the 25 May elections.
Meanwhile, as an act of defiance and a warning to the West, Russia held another massive nuclear drill involving ground troops and equipment, regional and ballistic missiles, and strategic nuclear bombers. Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu, while speaking about the nuclear drill to President Putin, said, "President Comrade Commander-in-Chief, pursuant to the Armed Forces Training Plan, today we are holding exercises to test the administration of troops and forces involving action practice. The exercises involve forces and facilities of all military districts, strategic missile forces, aerospace defense forces, and long-range aviation. This event, an important stage in the training of the armed forces in 2014, and is held pursuant to your orders issued 6 months ago," he said. Present-day challenges and threats to the nation's security make it imperative to maintain the Army and Navy in a state of readiness for quick and efficient counteraction under any circumstances. Shoigu went on to say, national security is unquestionably guaranteed by the strategic nuclear forces. Our nuclear triad is in constant combat readiness. It is regularly equipped with up-to-date missile units with enhanced combat capacity. In the course of today's exercises, we will demonstrate the combat capability of the strategic, offensive, and defensive forces. In a related incident just the other day, a U.S. F-15 fighter jet intercepted a Russian strategic nuclear bomber that encircled the island of Guam, where the U.S. maintains a significant military presence. Additionally, at least one other Russian nuclear bomber flew up to the coast of California. The incident was reported by the commander of the U.S. Air Force in the Pacific and may have been part of the Russian nuclear drill, but I was not able to confirm whether it was a part of the drill or not. Friends, the crisis in Ukraine has placed the world on the verge of World War III. It is my personal opinion that we have not been so close to World War III since the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962. Although we were very close to World War III in the summer of 2012, I believe that we are a lot closer now than we were then. Should Russia invade Ukraine, and even if the U.S. and West take no military action, it would only take one miscalculation to start an all-out war. One fighter jet making a mock attack on the opposing side, like what happened in the Black Sea recently, would likely get shot down. And this in turn would be the start of an East-West military confrontation. Additionally, if Russia managed to invade Ukraine without a direct military response from NATO allied nations, just the mere fact that Russian troops at some borders within such close proximity to NATO troops would now be inherently dangerous. Under an environment of extreme heightened tensions and mistrust, just one tiny spark would ignite World War III. In Matthew chapter 24, Jesus said, "For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines, pestilences, and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginnings of sorrows." He goes on to say in verse 33, "When you see all these things, know that it is near, at the very doors. Assuredly I say to you, this generation will by no means pass away till all these things are fulfilled. These things that Jesus spoke of are in the process of being fulfilled right before our eyes. The wise will take them for signs that we are indeed living in the last days. There is only one way to eternal salvation, one way to be forgiven, and that is through repentance of sin through Jesus Christ. Are you saved? If you follow the link in the box below and pray the prayer of salvation with a sincere heart, you will be saved. May God bless you and yours.